Welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to make a princess dart bustier. We will start by rolling a straight line to stand as our shoulder line. So from that line, which is our shoulder line, we'll mark 10.5, which is the bust point. We'll mark our under bust, which is 14 inches, and we'll mark our half length, which is 18 inches. So this point that we just marked, we are just going to repeat it at the other part of the paper. That's what I'm doing to enable me to roll out a straight line. So I'll roll out a straight line. I'm rolling out the half length, I'll roll out the under bust and the bust point. After rolling a straight line, I'll just label it my bust point, my under bust, and my half length. So I'm marking my shoulder divide by 2, and at that same point, I come down to mark my armhole depth. So my armhole depth is my bust divide by 6 plus 1.5. So whatever it gives you, you mark it. So I'm just going to mark it again to have a straight line and roll out the armhole line. Okay, so at my armhole, I'm coming down by 1 inch, and that will stand as my shoulder slope. But before I roll out the shoulder slope, I went ahead to mark the basic neck width, which is 3 inches. Then I now connect it to the shoulder slope. So I came down to find my armhole midpoint, the armhole depth midpoint. At the midpoint, I went in by ½ inch. Note that point. Then I mark my bust divide by 4. I went ahead to connect the 2 points to form my armhole curve. So after forming my armhole curve, after curving that point, I'll curve it up there. Just see the way I'm doing it and repeat the same thing, but still take note of your armhole midpoint point, that point that we went in by ½ inch. Still take note of it. So at my bust point, I'm marking my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches. Then at my under bust, I'm marking nipple to nipple measurement -1, and at the half length, I'm marking nipple to nipple measurement -1/2. So I'm going to repeat that again. At my bust point, I mark nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches. At my under bust -1, which is 3 inches, I mark nipple to nipple measurement -1, which is 3 inches at my under bust. Then at the half length, I'm having 3.5 inches, which is my nipple to nipple measurement -1/2. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect those points together. So first off, you see the way I turn my curve ruler to curve the bust point to the under bust. Then from the under bust to the half length, I'm going to connect with a straight line. Then from that bust point, I'm going to connect it back to our armhole depth midpoint where we went in by ½ inches. So I'm connecting it that way with that side of the curve. Please pay attention, back to the bust point. Okay, so at that same armhole point, I'm coming down by 1.5 inch. That 1.5 inch point is going to enable us to curve out our bust point. So at the under bust, I went in by 2.5 inches, and at the half length, I went in by 2 inch to form a straight line. Then I'm going to curve my bust curve now. Okay, so at the chest line, for me to freehand, I'm going to use my freehand to curve it back to the armhole. So what will enable me to have a good curve, I'm going in by ½ inch at the chest line. Then I'll just use my freehand to curve it into the bust point. Okay, so at this point, I'll just go ahead to smoothen out the curve. So after smoothing out the curve, then I'm just checking to make sure that at my chest line, I took ½ inches. So I'm replacing back the ½ inch, and I'm adding my sewing allowance, which is 1.5 inch. That's what I'm using for my sewing allowance. Then my round under bust circumference divide by 4. I just marked it. Then I replaced the 2.5 inches dart, and also added my 2 inches, my 1.5 inch allowance. But because my client wants a little bit tightening at the under bust, I'm going in again by ½ inch to ninch the waist, just to snatch the waist a little bit. Okay, then at the half length, which is the waist, I'm marking the waist measurement. You will divide by 4, which is 10 inches, plus the 2 inch allowance that we took out, and the 1.5 inch sewing allowance. So I'm going to connect these 3 points together with a straight line. So after connecting these points together, I came up at what we took out, the 1.5 inch we took out at the armhole area. I'm going up by that same 1.5 inch because sometimes if you don't give that allowance, you run short of fabric when you are joining the two busts together. So I'm just going to go up by that 1.5 inch, even though we'll still have some excess that we'll trim out later. Okay, so I'm marking my neck measurement now, which is 4x4, and I'll just curve it together. The width is 4 inches and the depth is 4 inches. So at the bust point, I'm taking out the bust dart. So I'm coming down by 1.5 inch. At first I wanted to take out 1 inch, but I decided to take out 1.5 inch at the bust point. Okay, if your client is not too busty, if it's 38 inches bust and above, you can take out just 1 inch. So I'm adding 0.5 inches allowance to the half length for joining. Okay, so when I'm done with this, I'm just extending my legs so that they will meet up with each other. Okay, so at the shoulder line, I also added 0.5 inch joining allowance. Then after this, I will just use marker to smoothen out the lines to make it obvious for us to see what I have just done. So the 1.5 inch that we took out at that armhole point to form our bust cuff. If your client is very busty, if you are very busty, you can use 2 inches, and if you're on the smaller side, you can use 1 inch. Okay, then at the under bust, instead of taking out 2.5 inches, if you are very busty, you can as well take out 3 inches, and at your half length you can take out 2.5 inch. Okay, so we are just going to gently cut through this. But before we cut our side part, we are going to take in that 1.5 inch side dart that we added, that bust dart. So when we take in that side dart, notice I didn't cut on the line, exact line, because when you take in the dart, the line will shift. So you just join the line and cut it out. Okay, I realized I didn't film that part. So this is the back part, and that is how I already went ahead to add our zipper allowance, and I had already drawn out our armhole depth and under bust line and the half length line. Now one thing is, all of these, the half length line and the under bust line, I minused 1.5 inch. Okay, that 1.5 inch that we took in by the side bust, I minus 1.5 inch to whatever half length that we had. You know, the back is usually shorter than the front. So at my waistline, I went in by 0.5 inch and 0.5 inch, and I connected it, that leg, I connected it to the chest line. So at my armhole depth line, I marked my midpoint and I connected it to my bust divide by 4 points. At the back area, we didn't go in by 0.5 inch the same way we did to the front, because the back and the front armhole is usually different. Okay, then at that my armhole point, I'm just going to have a gentle cuff to connect my dart leg. Okay, so that would be my princess dart leg, nothing serious, just gently connect in. So as we all know, the same thing we did to the front, I'm going to extend the dart leg so we don't run out of fabric while joining the two. And when you are joining, even if you have excess, just cut it off. At the end of the day, if you have excess, cut it off. So I marked, that's my allowance, I just marked. So my waist measurement, I marked the waist measurement, which is 10 inches, and I replaced the dart which we took in, the 1 inch that we took, plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance, and I connected it to our bust. So now I just went ahead to mark the neck measurement. The neck width is 4 inches and the depth is 1 inch, and I curved it in. Okay, so exactly the same thing we did to the front. I'm just going to go ahead to label it, and I'll use a marker to bring out all the lines more visible so that we can see it well. So I'm just going to explain this again so we understand what we just did. Okay, so the front half length was 18 inches, but the back half length is 16.5. We minus the 1.5 inch that we added to that we took off at the bust area. Okay,
I also added half inch to the shoulder and the half length. Okay, so not to make this video too long, I have a video linked in the description box on how we use this pattern to create a beautiful outfit. Okay, so when you cutting, add half inches all around your pattern where I just pointed at. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching to the end. See you in my next video. Bye.